She was not born into a palace. She was not handed a destiny wrapped in silk or sealed with a royal stamp. She came into the world with nothing but breath, family, and a God who was already writing her story before she could even speak. Born into bondage. Born under the shadow of the most feared empire on earth. Born at a time when her people cried out into what felt like an empty sky. But even in the darkness, something in her burned. A quiet fire, a watchful spirit, a faith that refused to bend even when everything around her was breaking. Her name was Miriam. And this is not just the story of a girl who stood by a river. This is the story of a woman who dared to believe when belief itself felt dangerous. A prophet, a leader, a sister, a voice. And this is her story. Part 1, the river and the reed basket, the land of Egypt, was not a place of mercy. Not for the Hebrew people. Not anymore. What had once been a season of provision, a time when one man's favor had opened the gates of an entire nation, had long since faded into memory. The pharaohs had changed. The gratitude had been forgotten, and the Hebrew people, once welcomed as guests, had been reduced to something far darker. Slaves, builders of cities they would never own, laborers beneath a sun that showed no sympathy, voices crying out in mud and brick and sweat. And then came the decree. The darkest command Pharaoh had yet delivered. Every Hebrew boy born was to be thrown into the Nile. Not hidden, not exiled, destroyed. The midwives trembled, the mothers wept, the fathers stood helpless against a power that seemed impossible to overcome. But not every heart in Egypt bowed to Pharaoh's cruelty. 2 midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, feared God more than they feared the throne. They refused the order, they protected the children, and God saw them. God remembered them. It was into this world, this terrifying, beautiful, desperate world, that a baby boy was born to a woman named Jochebed and her husband Amram from the tribe of Levi. And standing close, watching, waiting, full of love she didn't yet have words for, was their daughter. Miriam. She was young, perhaps no more than a girl, but her eyes were old in a way that spoke of understanding. She watched her mother hold the newborn close, pressing her lips to his forehead, whispering prayers over him that no Pharaoh could silence. For 3 months, Jochebed hid the child. Every footstep near the door became a held breath. Every noise in the street became a silent prayer. But a baby cannot stay silent forever. And Jochebed knew the time was coming when hiding would no longer be enough. So she did something that only a mother pushed to the very edge of faith could do. She let go. She wove a basket from papyrus reeds, sealing it with tar and pitch to keep out the water. She lined it with care. She placed her son inside, and then, with tears she could not hold back, and a faith she could barely explain, she carried that basket to the edge of the Nile River and placed it among the tall reeds near the bank. Then she walked away. But Miriam did not walk away. Miriam stayed. She positioned herself at a careful distance, close enough to see, far enough not to be noticed. She watched. She waited. She stood guard over her brother the only way she could, with her presence and her prayers. And this moment, this small, quiet act of a girl standing watch by a river, was the first great act of Miriam's story. She did not have power. She did not have rank. But she had faithfulness. And sometimes that is everything. Part 2, the Princess and the Providence, the Nile, was the heartbeat of Egypt. Its waters gave life to crops, to cities, to people. And on this particular morning, one of the most powerful women in Egypt came down to its banks to bathe. Pharaoh's daughter. A princess, raised in luxury, surrounded by servants and splendor. She moved through the world as someone who had never once been told no. And then she heard something unexpected. A sound rising from among the reeds, small, weak, unmistakable, the cry of a baby. She sent one of her attendants to bring the basket to her, and when she opened it, she looked down into the face of a Hebrew infant, eyes wet with tears, tiny hands reaching upward. And something moved in her. Compassion, ancient and undeniable, crossed the boundaries of empire and cruelty and decree. She knew immediately what this child was. She said it plainly. This is one of the Hebrew children. She could have turned away. She could have followed the law of her father, the command of the throne. But she did not. And that is precisely when Miriam stepped forward. With courage that belied her age, she approached the princess calmly, as though she had rehearsed this moment in her heart 1,000 times. Perhaps she had. "Shall I go and call a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" The princess looked at her, considered, and then said the word that changed everything. "Yes, go." Miriam turned and ran. Back through the reeds, back along the riverbank, back to the place she had left her mother standing, uncertain. Grieving, praying, "Come," Miriam told her mother. "There is someone who needs you." And so Jochebed walked back to the river, back to the daughter of the very Pharaoh who had ordered her son's death. She stood before the princess, heart pounding, and the princess placed the child back into his mother's arms. "Take this child and nurse him for me," she said, "and I will pay you." Jochebed held her son. She would be paid to raise her own child, protected by the palace itself. The plan that was meant to destroy a generation had just been used to preserve the very one who would one day lead it. The boy would be brought back to the palace when he was older. The princess would name him Moses because she had drawn him out of the water. But in this moment, standing at the edge of the Nile with her heart split open by wonder, it was Miriam who had made it possible. A girl with no army, no title, no authority, only courage, only watchfulness, only faith in a God who was moving quietly behind every event, every coincidence, every crack of light in a very dark world. Part 3. Years of silence, years of growth. Time passed. Moses grew up in the palace. He was educated, positioned, clothed in Egyptian privilege while carrying a Hebrew heart. Miriam grew up too. But her world was different. She grew up in the mud brick quarters of enslaved people, surrounded by the sounds of labor and suffering and prayer. Scripture does not tell us everything about these years. We do not know every conversation Miriam had. We do not know every sorrow she carried. We do not know the full weight of watching her people suffer while the world moved forward without relief. But we know this: she did not lose her faith. She did not forget who she was or whose she was. She remained among her people, rooted, present, faithful. There is a kind of invisible faithfulness that the world rarely celebrates. No stage, no spotlight, no great moment caught in the record of history. Just a woman moving through ordinary days with an extraordinary belief that God had not forgotten his people. This was Miriam in those years, unseen by the empire, fully seen by God. Part 4. The burning bush, the plagues, and the call. The moment came, as moments always do, without warning. Moses, now grown, now broken by the sight of his people's suffering, now carrying the weight of a killing he could not undo, had fled Egypt years before. He lived in the wilderness of Midian, far from the palace, far from the Hebrews, far from everything he had once known. He had become a shepherd, a quiet man in a quiet land. a man who had stopped believing he had any role left to play. And then God spoke from a burning bush that was not consumed. I have seen the suffering of my people. I have heard their cry. I know their pain, and I am sending you Moses to bring them out. Moses argued. He pleaded inadequacy, inexperience, the weight of his past, the certainty of his failure. But God was not persuaded. He sent Moses back to Egypt, along with his brother Aaron. And when Moses returned, Miriam was there. She had waited. All those years she had waited. And now the waiting was over. The plagues began. One by one, the power of Egypt was dismantled by a God who would not be ignored. The Nile turned to blood. Frogs, locusts, darkness, a hail that shattered crops and broke the pride of a nation. Pharaoh hardened his heart again and again. Each time the pressure relented, he pulled back his promise. Each time relief came, he returned to cruelty. Until the final night, the night that would be remembered forever, the night of Passover. The Hebrews marked their doorposts with the blood of a lamb. They ate in haste, sandals on, staffs in hand. They were ready to move. And at midnight, death passed through Egypt. Every firstborn in every home without the mark was taken, from the palace to the prison, from the highest to the lowest. Pharaoh, broken at last, summoned Moses in the darkness. "Go," he said. "Take your people, take everything, just go." And they went. Hundreds of thousands of people, men, women, children, livestock, everything they owned walked out of Egypt. After 400 years of bondage, they walked out free. Miriam walked with them. Part 5, The Sea That Split and the song that followed, but freedom, it turned out, was not yet safe. Pharaoh changed his mind. As the Hebrew people camped at the edge of the Red Sea, with water before them and the horizon behind them, the sound of chariot wheels grew louder. Pharaoh had taken his army, 600 chosen chariots, horsemen, soldiers. The full military power of the greatest empire on earth was bearing down on a group of people who had no weapons, no training, and nowhere to run. The people panicked. They cried out to Moses. They cried out to God. Some said it would have been better to stay enslaved than to die in the wilderness. Fear will do that to a person. Fear will make captivity seem safer than the unknown. Fear will dress itself up as reason and whisper that surrender is wisdom. But Moses lifted his staff, and God did something no human mind could have planned. A pillar of cloud moved. It placed itself between the Israelites and the Egyptian army, blocking them from advancing. Then the wind came, a strong east wind, driving all through the night, and the waters of the Red Sea divided. A wall of water on the right, a wall of water on the left, and dry ground in between. The Hebrew people walked through on dry land. Every man, every woman, every child, every animal. They walked through the sea like it was a road. And when the Egyptians followed, when the chariots drove into that impossible corridor between the walls of water, the ground beneath them became soft. Their wheels clogged, their horses faltered, their confidence cracked. And then the waters returned, all of it, crashing, surging, filling back in. The army of Egypt was swallowed by the very sea that had delivered the Hebrew people to safety. The people stood on the far shore and looked back. They saw the great army of Egypt lying still on the water's edge. They saw what God had done. And they feared. And they believed. And then Moses sang. A great song rose up from the people, a song of deliverance, of power, of a God who had fought for them when they could not fight for themselves. And when Moses finished, Miriam moved. She took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her, dancing, singing, tambourines shaking in the air. And Miriam sang out to the people, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea." This is the moment Scripture calls Miriam a prophet, not quietly, not in passing. She is named, she is titled, she is celebrated. Miriam the prophet, sister of Aaron, leader of women, voice of the delivered. She had waited her whole life for this moment, and when it came, she did not stand still, she danced. Because sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is celebrate what God has done, even when your feet are tired, even when the journey ahead is long, even when you still don't know exactly where you're going. You pick up the tambourine and you lead the dance. Part 6, the wilderness and the weight of leadership, the celebration on the shore of the sea, did not last forever. It never does. The wilderness was real. Vast, dry, demanding, a place where the memory of miracles fades quickly when the stomach is empty and the sun is merciless. Miriam walked with her people through all of it, through the complaining and the doubting and the returning, again and again to the same question: did God really bring us out here to take care of us? Or did he bring us here to let us die? It is a very human question. It is the question of every person who has ever stepped out in faith and found the path harder than expected. And Miriam was human, fully, completely human. Scripture does not hide this. In fact, it records one of the most difficult moments of Miriam's life with unflinching honesty. There came a day when Miriam and Aaron spoke critically about Moses, about the woman he had married, about his leadership, about the question that pride sometimes whispers even into good hearts: has God only spoken through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? It is a question rooted in comparison, in the ache of being overlooked, in the human hunger to be seen and heard and credited. We do not know the full weight of what Miriam carried in those years. We do not know every wound, every moment of being passed over, every decision made without her counsel. But we know that in this moment she stepped outside the boundaries of what she was called to do. And God responded. A cloud descended over the tent of meeting. God called Moses, Aaron, and Miriam forward. And he made something clear: when there is a prophet among you, I make myself known in visions and dreams. But not so with Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly, not in riddles. And when the cloud lifted, Miriam was covered in a skin condition that rendered her ceremonially unclean. Aaron looked at his sister and was stricken with grief. He turned to Moses and pleaded with him. And Moses, the man Miriam had protected as a baby on the river, the man she had watched from the reeds, the man whose destiny she had helped preserve, cried out to God on her behalf. 5 words, simple, urgent, filled with love. Please, God, heal her. And God heard him. But he also required a pause. Miriam stayed outside the camp for 7 days, 7 days of reflection, of solitude, of the kind of quiet that changes a person. And here is what is remarkable. Here is what speaks volumes about the people she had led. The entire nation of Israel waited. They did not move on. They did not pack up camp and continue the journey. They waited for Miriam. For 7 full days, hundreds of thousands of people paused their progress through the wilderness because they would not leave without her. This is the measure of a leader. Not titles, not positions, not unbroken perfection, but the kind of faithfulness that makes people say, "We will not go without you." Part 7, the final chapter, and the legacy that remained the wilderness years, were long. 40 years of wandering, of learning, of a generation being remade from the inside out. And somewhere in those years, in the wilderness of Zin, at a place called Kadesh, Miriam died. She did not reach the promised land. She saw the journey through for decades, through doubt and miracle and human failing and divine faithfulness. She walked every step she was given. And then she was gathered to her people. She was buried at Kadesh. And they mourned her. Scripture gives her death only a few short words, but the tradition that followed has never forgotten her. Long after the dust of Kadesh settled, God spoke these words through the prophet Micah, "I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I sent Moses to lead you, also Aaron and Miriam," 3 names, 3 leaders. Moses, Aaron, Miriam. Her name is there, not as a footnote, not as a supporting character, as a leader of the Exodus, named by God Himself. Closing what Miriam teaches us, the story of Miriam is the story of a woman who was faithful in the shadows before she ever stepped into the light. She stood watch by a river when she had no power. She spoke up when courage was required. She led worship when the moment called for it. She stumbled, as all of us stumble. She was restored, and she kept walking. There is something in Miriam's story for every person who has ever felt overlooked, every person who has served faithfully with no applause, every person who has held the line in dark years without recognition, every person who has wondered whether the God they believe in actually sees them. He sees you. He saw Miriam at the river. He heard Moses in the wilderness. He named her among the leaders who brought a people out of slavery. And the God who saw a young girl standing watch by the reeds of the Nile still sees the faithful ones standing watch today. Not by accident, not unseen, not forgotten. Chosen, called, carried, because the God who led a people through a divided sea is still in the business of making ways where there are none. And your story may be just beginning. For I brought you up from the land of Egypt, and redeemed you from the house of slavery, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam.